And this week's story time with Aunt Phil celebrating Flag Day.
Thursday, June 14th is the day to commemorate the adoption of the U.S. flag in 1777. Alaska's flag, that wouldn't come about for a few hundred more years. This morning, Laurel Bill tells us about the young boy who designed it in the 1920s.
8 gold stars and a field of blue. That's the first line to Alaska's flag song. It was a simple design by a Benson, better known as Benny.
Now, Ben, he was half Aleut, and he came up with the design. It's the 8 stars in the form of the Big Dipper and Polaris. So how did his design come up to be the state's flag?
Well, on a trip to Washington, D.C. in 1925, our Territorial Governor George Parks noticed that there was no Alaska flag flying among all the other state and territorial flags in the rotunda of the old U.S. Post Office building. So when he came back to Alaska, he created a contest so kids from 7th grade through 12th grade could enter designs. And so that was all across the territory. Benny, he was in Seward at the time. His mother passed away when he was only 4 years old. She was half Aleut, half Russian. And his father, who was a Swedish fisherman, could not care for Benny or his brother Carl. So he put them in the Jesse Lee home in Unalaska. Well, as soon as the missionaries got to know Benny, they knew there was something special about this little boy who had spiky black hair and had been nicknamed Porcupine. And then when the children were moved to the Jesse Lee home in Seward, the superintendent predicted that someday Benny would be very famous.
So Seward then is where he would get his inspiration for that flag design?
He loved looking up at the clear skies of his new hometown in Resurrection Bay and seeing the sparkling stars. So he took a 10 by 14-inch piece of art paper and he colored it a dark blue, and then he carefully drew the golden stars of the Big Dipper along with the North Star. And then in his childish handwriting, he wrote that the North Star was for the northerlymost state in the future, the Big Dipper was for the strength of the bear, and that the blue was for the color of the skies along with the forget-me-not flower in Alaska.
How many entries was Benny's design chosen from?
Out of 142 entries, his was the unanimous choice by all of the judges. And our flag actually flew for the very first time over Juneau on July 9th, 1927.
And it would reach even greater heights, eventually making its way into space?
In 1969, Benny was the only living state flag designer when all of the flags of the United States were put on board the Apollo 11 and shot into space for the historic trip where the astronauts actually landed on the moon for the first time. And then 3 years later, he passed away from a heart attack at the age of 58 on July 2nd, 1972. But his memory does live on in that simple flag of the last frontier.
So next week in Storytime with Aunt Phil, it is wedding season. How June became one of the most popular months to marry and the challenges miners of the Klondike Gold Rush era faced in order to tie the knot. Should be an interesting one.